Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Fireside Friday. My name is Jack Miller. I'm the president of T360, and I have this month we are covering organized real estate, and we have some organized real estate leaders here who I'll introduce shortly. With me today is Clint Skutchan, who leads our consulting practice in the organized real estate space and has been my partner for this month's Fireside Friday chats. As usual, if you have questions or comments or anything you want to put into the conversation today, feel free to use the chat at the bottom of the Zoom bar. We've had some really great questions come in that way, and we'd love to answer them while we have our guests here today with us. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Denee Evans, who is the CEO for the Council of Multiple Listing Services. And so welcome, Denee. We're delighted to have you.
Hello, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, and separately we have Brad Bjelke who's the CEO of Utah Real Estate and another organized real estate leader who's at the state level and who will be helping us think about the conversation from the perspective of a person that has lots of brokers and agents to keep happy in the state of Utah. So welcome, Brad.
Thanks, Jack. Looking forward to it.
Great. So first of all, I just would love to hear how you guys are doing. Like, what's your been experience? This has been 2020 has been an unusual year for everybody. I think anybody that is in charge of an organization and has had lots of challenges thrown at them in 2020, both personal and professional. We've all had to adjust our work lives, our personal lives, our home lives, our school lives, everything. So how are you? How are your families? How's your health? How's your organization? Give us a little update. Why don't we start with you, Denee?
Well, it's been an adventure, I think, for all of us. I think I worked from home before. CMLS doesn't have an office, so I was already a work from home, but I feel like the rest of the world sort of joined us. That adventure, but I have two daughters, and so we've been adjusting to virtual school. We went all virtual here, so balancing that of just in case my 11-year-old did run in the other day and tell me I needed to get off my work call so that she could get on her school classes. So just in case that happens. But overall, I think we've had health, we've kept our health and been navigating it, just trying to go each day of controlling what we can control and figuring out what is our new adventures and just trying to be as positive as we can and saying that it's okay to have the meltdowns when we need to, because I think that's been kind of important for us to acknowledge is, sometimes it's not okay, but we get back up and still keep going and saying, all right, what are we going to do now and move forward? And I found that both in not only just work and business, but with the family life and friends as well. So the adventure, but we just keep going and figure out how we support each other and move forward. And I appreciate the work colleagues as well as friends and family. So new appreciations all around.
Yeah. I think parents have had, it's just been an extra special challenge for anybody that's got kids at home. And I have two sons that are school age, and we're having the same as you, where my son could walk in and ask for help with an assignment any minute now. So so I feel that. Brad, what about yourself? Go ahead. Sorry, Denee.
Well, I was going to say, my favorite was I had my 11-year-old run in one day and say, Mom, I need your help. And I'm on a call and I'm like, what do you need help with? I'm trying to whisper. And it was PE class and she needed me to hold her feet while she did her sit-ups. So I'm like holding her feet under my desk as she's doing her 10 sit-ups. So that was like a whole new adventure. But, we're doing it, right? You go with it.
It's a great story. So, Brad, what about yourself? How's this life in 2020 been for you and your family, your organization? What's happening?
Well, first and foremost, we've been healthy. So the family, close family and friends have all been healthy. Nobody on my staff has contracted COVID, which is pretty much an amazing thing because we have a pretty large staff. And so we've been healthy through the whole thing. On the home side, it's interesting. So I finished first in my class in high school and college and was on the law review in law school. And then I taught college for 12 years teaching law. I think I am certified now as the worst homeschool teacher in the history of I cannot do a very good lesson plan with my kids who are in elementary school still. So it has been a challenge. But in Utah, things have not shut down as much as they have in other parts of the world. So my kids are back in school now full time, and we're progressing pretty well here. So being cautious, keeping people at home. We have people in the office when we need to be here, and things are going well. So we're lucky and blessed.
That's great. I'm glad to hear it, Brad. And I think especially heartening that there are areas that are, returning to some level of normalcy in terms of kids being able to go back in classes, and, businesses being open, and people being able to go in like you are going into your offices and being able to work. So it's good to see, and hopefully we see more of it in the coming months. So great update. Thank you.
Yeah.
Brad, you alluded to it that you have a unique background, because when folks think of data nerds that run MLSs, they don't equate that to law degrees. So tell us a little bit more about your background, and in particular how you made your way into the MLS space.
Yeah, it's a crazy story, really. I was a journalism major and was basically on the radio. I had a radio show in college at the college radio station, and I was going to go to USC. I had a full scholarship for their school of journalism, which is one of the best in the country, and just didn't feel like it was the right fit for me. And so I went to a smaller school that I felt really great at, and majored in political science and English. And I have a pretty strong writing background and speaking background, and decided, I'm going to try law school after that. And so I went to Boston College Law School, which was at the time, I think it was ranked like 15th in the country. It's still a top ranked university for law, and went the regular legal path, and came out of law school and had a bunch of offers around the country to go to big law firms. And when I'm talking the big ones, I'm talking the ones that have, full kitchens and beds and showers, and people work around the clock. And came back to Los Angeles for that, and worked at a huge law firm for a number of years, and then was starting to get a little burned out by the big law life. And so I went to a smaller law firm, smaller, about 150 lawyers. And I was doing kind of corporate labor litigation work. And through that, one of the partners that I worked with represented a company that was doing association management software in the real estate space. And they were getting ready to go into the MLS business, and needed some help with intellectual property and corporate and legal stuff. And the partner was really not the person to deal with technology. And so she asked me to help out with that client. And then eventually, after a couple of years of being outside counsel for that client, they were growing pretty rapidly, and asked me to come in-house. And they said, can you do law? Can you do HR? Can you do corporate stuff? And so I came in, I learned the business. I love technology. I've always loved technology, but I sat a ton with the programmers and ended up overseeing the developers and doing the legal stuff. And that really brought me into the industry, got me connected. And that was 2004. So it's been 16 years since I started. And from that tech company, I went to CMLS and worked for the largest MLS in the country at the time, with Art Carter, and then took the CEO position here in Utah. And here I am almost 6 years later, and as the CEO of UtahRealEstate.com. Well,
as a fellow college DJ alum, I have to ask, what was your on-air name?
Oh, it was just Brad. It was just Brad B. And I was on it. What's funny is I was on it like 12:30 in the morning until 3. And I could do whatever I wanted, because I knew the only people listening were my roommates and family and friends. And so in a time where there wasn't as much oversight, I kind of turned a radio music show into a talk show, because I wanted to talk about whatever I wanted to talk about.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, I started out doing the overnights. I ended up being the music director for our college radio station, which was awesome, because I got to just get exposed to all this new music. So that's cool. Awesome. Denee, these stories of happenstance, like Brad's, where people didn't start out to be in this industry and yet ended up here, are very common. What's your kind of origin story with regard to CMLS and just the organized real estate space in general?
Mine is fairly similar, of one path and then the turning. I started as a bank teller. Was my first job, really, was at Bank of America as a teller. Worked my way up through that. My degree is finance, although I did change it as a specialty in real estate. So I have always loved real estate, but I had my investment license, my Series 7, 63. And then it's always been a little tangential to real estate in one way or another. And so from the investing, I did mortgage for 10 years, survived that time frame in 08, 09. Happened to be working at the one company, Countrywide at the time, and I was in the mountains with no cell coverage when everything blew up with that company. So I came back into coverage and my cell phone blowing up with, "Are you okay? Is everything okay?" And I'm like, "What happened?" To find out of what did happen. And then actually ended up running a nonprofit here in the state of Nevada because I was helping them to set up a financing program to help homeowners make their homes more energy efficient. So with my background in finance and lending, we set up a no interest loan program for the state of Nevada using the ARA funds, the American Recovery Act, and got tied on with this nonprofit and then got asked to help to run it with their executive director left. And I had no experience in the nonprofit space. Had never really, I just had been in banking my whole career really. And so I did that for a few years. And then that's when I got introduced to the MLS space officially, because we were working with multiple listing services to help show what we were doing in improving those homes and energy efficiency into the MLS so homeowners would know about it, which is where I met through a meeting with HUD representatives, met Shelley Specchio in Reno at the time. And then here I am 6 years later at CMLS. And, but always my passion for real estate, as I said, it's helping people either save for a home, helping them understand how to build credit for a home. So there's always been this tie to it. It's just never quite as direct. And if you'd have told me a few years back of running a trade association with multiple listing service to help make homeownership happen, it just wasn't even in my brain. But I think kind of that idea of what your goals are and how you end up happening to make that change, I think is kind of that leave a little bit open to what the universe has for you, but interesting pathways to make it happen. And I love what I get to do, and I get to work with some absolutely amazing people. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, so it's both of you came from, we've talked to a lot of people over the last 9 months, and we've had a lot of people that come in. I mean, we've had brokers on here that, they grew up with their parents in real estate, and then they, became agents and then went through. So there's lifers, there's people that have grown up in the industry, and there's people that come from outside. I came from technology industry 20 years ago. So I'm just curious where I segue into our next question. What are some of the things that you've, that have resonated the most with you about real estate? What do you really like about the industry, or what's it different? Brad, you coming from law and legal, I came from technology. So when I came in, it was like, there were some things that were very different. Like when I went to my first NAR conference, they were selling like handbags and jewelry on the floor, which I was not accustomed to at a trade conference. In the background of the technology conference I'd been to, that's just a kind of a funny side note. But what did you guys, having come from outside, what did you notice, or what stuck with you, and what do you like about it?
Well, coming from a big law firm where you have, we were on like 10 floors of a 60-story building in downtown LA, and it was a very formal life, right? There was every Thursday night they brought in a full meal and a bar, and but the expectations were pretty crazy on the work side, and so it was just a very formalized life. And I think technology, when I got into the tech company, it was just such a great experience to be around developers and professionals and support people, and I really enjoyed the management experience of that. And I think managing big litigation cases that I did initially helped me really kind of get a feel for how a company should run, and that brought me a lot of success over the years. But I think the people in real estate are really what's, I think, the best thing about it, is that you have really great people. You have really amazing marketing people and great minds for thinking about if I have a rule, how do I get around the rule? And if I have a marketing plan, how do I make that marketing plan even better? How do I reach people? And I think that is really fun. It's fun to talk to all of our members and our brokers, and to see their different business styles and how they've emerged. It keeps it lively. The industry is very lively. It's changing. There's pressure on it. So you're seeing, even though it always feels slow when you look back, but it's evolving so quickly that it makes life at an MLS and running an MLS so much fun. Every single day there's something new to do, new people to talk to, great customer base. So I love it. And every day it's challenging and fun as well.
Denee, what about you? I remember when you came into the industry, we met at one of the conferences and I was introduced to you as like, oh, this is the new CEO of CMLS, and she's new to the industry. So I remember early and saying, oh, you're gonna really enjoy this industry. And I had lots of reasons of my own to tell you that, but I'm curious as to what you found since you've been here with us for 6 years.
I think a lot of people were a little concerned because I was new to the industry, but I think with my background and connections, like I said, still around real estate and being familiar with the process and the transaction, and just, I think the key to home ownership and so my passion for it of helping, like the wealth building tool of real estate, right? Like the ability to own a home and helping to make that happen from the different areas that I had participated before. I think what sticks out to me the most, what I appreciated the most was the sense of community that is, and I think Brad talked a little bit about that, but where I've had this opportunity at CMLS and working nationally with people, one of the most common things I heard when I came in is, what can we do to support or to help or to, what can we do? So I think that little bit of difference of just that total sense of community within this industry, I so appreciate. But the difference between the two, I think that I brought from the outside with coming in at CMLS was my business background coming into the association, the nonprofit, was somebody taught me on when I first started at the previous nonprofit, was that it is a tax status, not a way of business, right? So still running these really healthy sort of business-oriented, efficient organizations that are still having strategic plans and still looking to make, when you're looking to make community impact, it can be really hard to track how are we doing that? It's not as many, key performance indicators, and I find that very difficult to track and show where we're making impact. But I've tried very much to combine my business experience in running a banking center. I managed banking centers before, or, when we were in doing the different business and finance sides, how much can we really bring that to the association, to the nonprofit side of, there's a lot of similarities to that, and still making them productive and track that progress and impact. And then I think the other piece is bringing also, when I worked at Bank of America, we lived and died by customer service, or Gallup would come in and do polls of our customers. And so I really try to bring that as well to what we're doing to serve our customers, right? And it's the members today, right? But really trying to bring that of like, how can we best support our members? What does that look like? And always talking about that. And for us at CMLS, I find the challenge, our member and our customer is the MLS, but then what's their customer and then their customer? It's like we're talking about 3 different customers at the same time. And how do we keep those all part of the conversation? Because we're going to win as an industry when we're thinking about all of them together, right? But it's not a simple little formula, but I just have one customer I can focus on. It's a little more layered and nuanced, but I've been very excited to see how those relationships and conversations between the relationship of the MLS, the broker, and their customer, I feel like as an industry, we're doing a lot better job of facilitating that conversation.
Well, that's a perfect segue into talking about a little bit about CMLS. And, I know that some of our listeners, some of our regulars on this call know who CMLS is. Some may not. We have some brokers that come in that aren't necessarily plugged into the MLS world. And so I'm curious to hear from both of you a little bit about CMLS as an organization, what it is, what it does, what its function is, and kind of your perspective on CMLS today. Denee, you're in charge of it, so I'll start with you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what CMLS is and what it's intended to produce and how it works.
Awesome. So CMLS is the National Trade Association for Multiple Listing Services. We have just over 200 MLSs, but those 200 MLSs serve about 1.3 million subscribers. So it's a significant portion of the marketplace. And we work to advance multiple listing services in promoting best practices and really highlighting what what is it that the very best are doing, and sharing those among all of our members, bringing them together to discuss and talk about what could be the solutions and innovations of advancing our industry. We were formed in 1957, so I think that puts us at about 63 years old, and it started as the Northwest Council of MLSs, where it was a much smaller room where they would come together and everybody would sort of introduce themselves and talk about what was their challenge, what were they working on in their market, and everybody would pitch in and help and talk about how could you solve that problem, or maybe already solved it, and hey, don't reinvent the wheel, here's a couple of ideas. And so I think in the spirit of that, we still really try to do that today, as CMLS isn't coming to them and saying, here is your solution, really driving home the idea that the solutions are within our members to talk and come up with that. And I think we've seen that over the last few years of so much of the projects and the initiatives that are coming out are MLS driven, right? They're really pushing forward a lot of these different things, like a line that Brad's part of, MLS Grid. You've got Common Data Platform. I mean, there's a lot of things where we're trying to solve the issues and the challenges out there and foster some innovation. So that's who and what CMLS is, bringing together MLS industry. We also have business partners who come part of that, because just as MLSs, it's all of it. We've got brokers that participate and come as a volunteer leadership at those MLSs. So we try to be very inclusive in our conversations, to say we can't just talk about it in a silo. We've got to make sure that the industry is part of these conversations. So that's my talk about it as the CEO, I'm sure Brad can talk a little bit more as the chair and then also a member.
Yeah. So Brad, give us your perspective. You run a large MLS, so you're a contributing member, but you're also a volunteer in the organization. So what's your perspective on it from where you sit?
So I've been a part of it for a long time. So I think the first time I went to a CMLS conference was 2005, and really 15 years ago, it was really about meeting up once a year with your peers from around the country. Back at a time where there weren't as many conferences. Now we have none, right? But back then it was pretty small. You had the NAR meetings and CMLS, and Inman hadn't really even started rolling yet, and so it was an opportunity just to get together, and it was a small room. It was about I remember maybe 150, 200 people were in a small little conference room, and it was similar to what we do today, which is talk about issues, and had panels and had speakers, but it was really an opportunity to socialize with your peers and figure out what's going on around the country. And it's evolved obviously from then. It was a once a year, completely volunteer run organization, to now we have Denee and we have a professional staff, and it's a lot more than just a conference, right? It is best practices, and the organization gets together and comes up with best practices for the entire industry. We've moved into a policy making entity, right? We work closely with the National Association of Realtors and with our members to put forth changes to policies that will really help our industry get forward. And sometimes it always feels like that moves slowly, but it is in the forefront of what we're doing now. And so from policies to breakout sessions to other little mini conferences that we have during the year to our big conference, CMLS has just evolved and emerged. And I think people look at us now as the leader for MLS. Before, we were the leaders coming together of the MLS. CMLS now, I feel, is the leader of the MLS industry going forward. And it's amazing to be a part of. Like I said, I would be asked to be a speaker every couple of years back in the day, and to see where it is now, I wanted to get involved when I became the CEO here, and ran for the board, and I'm chair this year, and there'll be great chairs after me coming, and it'll just get better and better as an organization.
Talk a little bit about the evolution from just a best practices networking entity into that policy piece. Specifically, maybe talk about some of the initiatives that you all have been directly involved in over the last couple of years, and what it took to make that shift into being someone that was ready to step up as an organization and influence, if not, and bring forward policy that was going to shape the industry.
I think the biggest thing that we decided to do, and I wasn't on the board at the time, was to hire a professional, a CEO, to come and run the organization. You had amazing volunteer leaders who wanted to help run the conference and do things, but that they also have full-time jobs and very busy full-time jobs. And so when we hired Denee, it gave the ability for that organization to take that next leap. And so Denee was able to take so many of the ideas that the volunteer leaders thought about CMLS and wanted it to happen for the organization. And she was able to put that in motion by bringing that organization up, dedicating herself to it full time as an employee and a CEO. And that is really what took us forward. The ideas are there. I think they've been there for a long time. And now watching it come to fruition, and also really the relationships that Denee's been able to make are different than the ones that I make or some of the past presidents have made and chairs. It's really, she's able to be there to talk to the brokers, the largest brokers, small brokers, to NAR leadership. And I think that those partnerships have brought those organizations together and into a constant exchange of ideas and a constant exchange of understanding where the industry is possibly going, and then bringing that to life. And so that's where we're at. And I think every year we get better and better, and I think we mature as an organization. And that's the exciting thing. When I ran for chair, I wanted to say, let's take it to that next level operationally. Let's make sure that we have all of our policies in place and all of our corporate documents, and making sure that we're poised for what is going to happen. And it's already happening, which is we are a really important, I think, organization and respected now throughout the country.
Denee, let me ask you. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, jump in.
Well, if I could add specifically on the policy, the board has definitely identified this and wanting to get more involved in promoting and advocating for policy that creates more efficiencies within the marketplace and better supports brokers and agents in doing their daily jobs. And I've been calling it powering the professionals. How do we do a better job of that as MLSs? And so I think a really great example is PDAP. And because we all love our acronyms, but that is a policy that CMLS actually crafted and submitted to NAR's emerging issues. And so PDAP stands for Participant Data Access Policy. And what that was is actually codifying, and I was a little surprised or a lot shocked to find out that there was nothing in policy that actually required an MLS to give a broker back their own data. So it just was an assumption, and of course you would, but it wasn't in policy. And every once in a while, I would still get some calls from different places saying, well, I'm not getting my data back. And so we brought that up as, hey, let's just close that loophole. That doesn't make any sense. The brokers should be entitled to their own data back. So we put that out to the board, we crafted it, we put it out, we got input from the industry. It wasn't initially exactly what we put out, but I think that speaks to the process of creating policy within our industry, which I think is continuing to evolve and being participated more and more by by the community itself. We did talk to brokers, we talked to different parties involved in that. So not only did we put that policy forward, but then CMLS also turned around and created a work group that produced a resource of how to implement that in different markets for an MLS, a resource guide. So not only are we putting out the policies, but then helping to support the implementation of that at an MLS. And so we want to continue doing that. We've identified another one that we're looking to produce in March that will be looking at, again, efficient flow and distribution of MLS data and how a broker interacts with their MLS. So we're going to be making a call for participants on that work group. That will be a little more comprehensive and detailed, but again, it's just how do we continue to support the broker and agent community and making the interactions with the MLSs better and more efficient and simple, while still ensuring the gold star standard of data that is MLS.
Yeah, I think that, there's a lot of inherent conflicts in our industry based on, I'll put it kind of very anecdotally, but whoever thinks they're in charge, right? In terms of, you have MLSs that have made some policies that then the brokers say, wait a minute, I thought those were our listings to begin with, and don't we have some ability to do things with them? And the MLSs say, well, no, but you've charged us with regulating them and making sure that they're handled a certain way. And so there's a natural tension, I think, between and there's a lot of those in real estate. That's one of the fascinating things about this industry is we're an industry that's decided to cooperate, but it doesn't mean that there isn't some dynamic tension in that cooperation. And the MLS is like one of the places where it really shows up. So we did just have a question come in from somebody that's relevant to that. And it made me think of this is like, talk to me about you guys' each perspective on the clear cooperation policy, and because that's kind of at this heart of like, how do we cooperate? You know, if we're going to agree that the MLS serves a certain role, then what are the bounds of that role, and how is it used for enforcement and to maintain a healthy marketplace? It kind of what's the perspective you guys have on that policy, for instance, or this concept in general?
Well, I think clear cooperation it is one of the biggest policies that have been put forth in the past 10 years. And I think the reason why it's so powerful was really it's the push for transparency in a lot of ways. And I think the great thing about the MLS is it's the glue to the database, right? It's the glue to the data that comes in from brokers and agents. And as a broker cooperative, we want to facilitate that data in the fairest way possible. And I think what clear cooperation shored up was it shored up the consumer not being able to see or find listings that they know may or may not be there. There may be a sign on a property, but it's not in the MLS. Their agent can't find it. Maybe it's on a big syndication portal site, but it's not over here. And I think that what the MLS does is it helps the consumer have a level playing field on information. And I think that is the backbone of what the MLS is about. And when we lose sight of that, I think that's how you see fractured industries. You see fractured databases. The commercial industry is a great example of that in a lot of ways, right? It doesn't work in an organized fashion like residential real estate via the MLS and the rules and regs of the MLS. So I think clear cooperation, the policy itself is it's so simple, right? If you're going to advertise a property within a business day, you have to put it in the MLS, right? You have to get it out there so it can be seen. And there's no way it can be seen more than than having it on the MLS, because it's going out to agents, it's going out to clients. If the agent wants, it can be syndicated to any website they want it to be syndicated to. And I think it's a pretty fair practice, but I do know it's controversial. And like I said at the beginning, one thing I love about our brokers and agents is they are very creative in how they want to market and do their marketing within their community. So there's definitely controversy around it, but I think in the greater good, I think what you're going to see is a benefit to the consumer. And at the end of the day, we want our members to do well. We want their clients to do well, but we want the consumer to win in the end of the day, because that makes everybody win.
Simple in concept, complex in delivery, and certainly one that has, and even we're seeing something in the chat section about, people who aren't fully embracing this concept. So you jumped into this and we're very vocal as an entity, knowing full well that this would probably be one of those that would be shaping the industry. And generally when you do that, there are those who are pro, those who are con, as Jack said, natural tension. But what about the complexity of the implementation of this? We're certainly seeing, it impacts brokerage business models. It's impacting MLSs in terms of the delivery and execution of it with, the types of statuses that have been incorporated and how to deal with all those. So now in the follow-up to that, I know you guys have done some of that best practices type of work, but in general, what's been the conversation around CMLS, seeing the complexity of how it's been received?
So, as I said, we did the implementation guide on the PDAP. We also did one on clear cooperation. And I guess I would just start at the heart of our industry and the heart of the MLS is cooperation. And so it's either that you're inputting it and willing to share it with the cooperative, or you're not. And so I think if we just look at it from that initial piece, and I think there was a lot of, in our implementation guide, we even talk about, there was just implementing clear cooperation itself. There was a lot of talk also about statuses and whether there was coming soon and different parts and pieces to that. But just in and of itself, the core of clear cooperation was, are you putting it into the MLS to cooperate, or advertising it outside? So there's that piece. And then separately, if you look at the guidepost, and I think I just saw that link was put in there, you could also do it with other statuses. So I think there was some confusion on how that was discussed or talked about. And I think as an industry, we can continue talking about how we can best serve the brokers and the agents, but ultimately we do still have to keep in mind in the discussion around what's best for the consumer. And that open and transparent marketplace, and especially as we're continuing this discussion around fair housing and what's accessible and some of the videos that we saw coming out of Long Island, I think as an industry, we can't separate those two conversations at this particular time. Absolutely. So when it is out there and the consumer can see what is available, and that if we're as an industry saying, that were willing to cooperate and share. And I just think sort of the separation of if it's marketing versus if it's in the MLS and we're willing to share the information. And the story I used the other day was, I saw in a comment early on when it was posted, one of the agents said, well, no, that's why a consumer would come to me so that I can show them what's the available properties. And my response to that was, no, because now you as the agent have to know the right agent in order to even know that that property exists as well. So it's just creating these layers of, I got to know the right people to find the right house. And it just, the transparency of our marketplace and what we do in MLS here in North America is so amazing compared to what you see around the rest of the world. And we get calls and emails all the time from other countries saying, hey, can you talk to us? Can you connect us with people to come? How do you get these people to cooperate? It's the coolest thing. So I think we got to stop and just acknowledge a little bit of how amazing that is and to the benefit of the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a sidebar, you mentioned the kind of, I think fair housing is at play here in terms of accessibility to inventory and understanding that. And anybody watching it, if you haven't watched the recording of the New York Senate subpoena hearings on the following up from the Long Island study last year, that is some fascinating viewing in terms of how the public representatives are viewing the real estate industry, and that probably similar to what we've seen happen in some markets in Canada, which people will say, oh, it's Canada, but relevant in that they decided to really step in very strongly into the real estate industry and regulate in a way that is unprecedented. And so anyway, I'd recommend watching it because if you're not exposed to what the legislators are thinking about our industry after something like that, it's good. It's like being aware of that, I think brings the relevance to the consumer and to the fair housing concerns really to the forefront. So, but I appreciate you mentioned it because it prompted me to remember that. So we've got a lot of comments coming in from our attendees on this because we have some very active brokers and agents that come to these, and I'll just have one follow up and then we'll move on. But what about enforcement on this kind of thing? Because we are, we've kind of put the MLS in the position of being the cop on this and saying you guys are responsible for making sure everybody plays by the rules. We've agreed to cooperate, but then hey, you guys make sure that everybody plays by the same rules. This one seems really challenging on enforcement. So I'm just curious to hear a little bit of commentary on what you're seeing from the membership, Denee and Brad, and kind of what the conversation around enforcement is, because it does seem challenging. It doesn't take much for a listing agent to leave a coming soon, a non-branded coming soon sign sitting on the side of the house and telling the homeowner, like, hey, if you want to let people know it's coming on the market, I left you a sign on the side of the house. And then, so there's a lot of, like you said earlier, Brad, there's a lot of people that are clever in this industry about our rules. Yeah. So any comments on that?
I'd love to give you kind of the real life picture here for Utah. I mean, I have my experience, but we do not have a coming soon status. We've never had one. And so when Clear Cooperation was passed, we went out and we did it early. So we put it in place, probably one of the first MLSs in the country to roll the rule out, but we spent a lot of time training. We went out. I have a lot of boots on the ground and we go out to the brokers' offices daily. Obviously COVID has changed that, but we were out before this happened. We were out months and months before Clear Cooperation came out, teaching how it's going to work, how it's going to be applied. And I can tell you after the first 4 or 5 months that we had implemented it, we had only had 5 violations. And I've got 18,000 realtors, my market, and we had 5. And we have only seen a trickle of complaints come in over the months, and it has not been heavily impactful. I can't tell you that it was a perfect rollout. I can't tell you we did it perfectly, but I think without having a coming soon status to conflict sort of with the Clear Cooperation, because there's parts of that are very similar, we were able to really roll this out in our marketplace in an effective way. And people have played by the rules. And it has been, we have seen, even though everybody around the country is seeing inventory decrease because there's a frenzy in buying, I would say that before the frenzy started, we were seeing an uptick in inventory as more and more people were putting their listings into the MLS. And so we're still seeing record-breaking sales every month, month over month in Utah. But I'm different. I don't have the coming soon status, and I know that has caused some conflicts in other markets. So there's definitely, I'm sure, places where it has become very controversial. In Utah, I think it has helped. It actually has helped make our brokers really embrace it and really push to enforce it. So we have not had an enforcement issue at the MLS. I mean, I guess I should say that first and foremost. It has been a lot less of a time strain on my staff and not very many complaints coming in. I would say MLS of choice, when that policy, which was another huge policy that came into play, that was much more of a strain on our staff because there was so many questions and a lack of understanding.
I think, Brad, where we're seeing a lot of the strain around the enforcement and the implementation component is in those markets where, unlike yours, where you have a lot of consolidated data and you largely cover an entire state. In those instances where we're having, MLSs who are instituting best practices like they've gotten through CMLS, but then they have neighbors who maybe are concerned about losing market share that aren't quite following the letter of the law. And so there's created this dynamic between the MLSs that's added an additional element of the competition that already exists, and competition unto itself isn't a bad thing. But when we're then taking advantage or promoting, not fully implementing the rule as an advantage in the marketplace to gain market share, I think there is an issue with that. And obviously you wouldn't have experienced that. I don't know, Denee, if you're hearing similar things, but certainly with some of my clients, I'm hearing that.
I have heard that in some markets where I think initially when clear cooperation came out, where Brad said they went first with education and really getting out to inform, there was some challenges to that because obviously in lockdowns and whatnot. So I think there was this change of how do we still engage our customers and our brokers and agents to help them understand what it is. But then I think after that, once MLS has figured out, they were doing, Zoom meetings and classes, and their attendance was really high. And I would say for the most part, we're getting really great feedback actually of people saying, thank you for doing this. I mean, it passed the NAR board of directors like with 10 no's or 2 no's or something, and that's like 800. And so there's people secretly coming in to say before they didn't think that they could say anything about it because then they wouldn't be allowed to be participating in those other groups. And so now they're saying thank you because that they look better because they actually can bring the inventory to their customers. There's not things hiding from the professional themselves, that they have full access to it. So I think, yes, there are some markets, Clint, that are doing that, and we're working to promote and say that, hey, we need to all do this. But for the most part, I think that it has been adopted, and enforcement, there still are questions. There's still one-off situations that we're working as between NAR or CMLS is issuing those best practices and solutions, and that implementation guide that I've spoken to is how can we address those needs to meet the broker needs and agent needs and meet the needs of the consumer overall with still that transparency piece of the marketplace.
I want to just weigh in on this one because I've seen some of the comments and I think they're great. But I think the market dictates a lot of this, right? The way the market is currently behaving, it's a frenzy. There's pressure on our agents and brokers to show the value of what services they're providing when they put the house on the market on a Friday and it's sold on the Saturday. There doesn't even need to be a picture in some cases, right? Our days on market have dropped to I think it's 7 in our main counties across the state of Utah. 7 days, and that's high-end properties will skew that number. I think that's really what we're facing here is clear cooperation at its essence. Long term is going to be a great policy. Right now, it changes the dynamic of how buyers and sellers and agents are marketing properties because it is such a frenzy with multiple offers, and you can barely get the sign company to put the sign in the ground and the house is already sold.
Yeah, I think as a broker, I've operated in brokerage before and I've sold real estate before. And I think that, in situations where there is this kind of market pressure and stress from the clients in the situation, like anything you're doing of value to the client, like it's just really hard to take that away for some people. I think I remember that. I was back in brokerage days, I was a big coming soon marketer. I mean, we had a dedicated Twitter for it. We did all this stuff, but that was when days on market were forever. And we were just doing every week, we were like brainstorming, what can we do to show our clients we're doing something valuable for them? Because we had just had a market crash and nobody had any money, and we had listed, and we're at the other side of it now, but it's still the same kind of pressure coming from the market. So Brad, I think you're 100% right on that. And I'm very, by the way, I'm very sympathetic to the brokers that are on this call. They're saying, hey, this is valuable to us. And because I was doing it as a broker, I remember doing this and saying, look, this is something we can do that's unique and different, and keeps the wheels turning of the engine of real estate in the local market. So yeah, this is a very small plug, but I'm going to give it because it's relevant. We are writing in the Swine Pool Trends Report. We are going to be covering the clear cooperation policy. We've done some research on it in this year's edition, which was released in December. We're in pre-order right now, so go to t3trends.com. You can order a copy, but most of the people on here are already ordering copies, so it's a little bit of just a reminder for people to pre-order because we only print so many every year. Guys, we've hit our time, but I do want to give both of you the opportunity to say, do you have any words of wisdom or anything that you'd like to share with the community that follows T360 that you think that we've learned from this past year, or you've learned personally from this past year? Or that you've learned from this conversation that you want to highlight, and just anything to share as a closing thought.
So I'll start by saying I have really been trying to advocate and promote the fact that when we say the MLS, that the MLS is made up of brokers and agents who sits around the boardroom. And so if anybody is looking to get involved or talking about the MLS, just realize it is our community. It is made up of hopefully some people that are on this call, whether you're MLS staff or volunteer leadership, or maybe you want to get involved and understand how it works. So really trying to promote that, and also say that even if you want to get involved in MLS or better understand how it works, you don't actually just have to get on the board of directors. It could just be developing a relationship with your MLS executive. So if you're in Utah, you can call Brad, or if wherever you're at, being willing to take a phone call or to reach out to that MLS executive to meet with them and understand what are some of those challenges. Why do you have a coming soon status or not? How is clear cooperation happening in your market? And you don't have to just be on the board of directors to be involved with your MLS. Develop that relationship and share your thoughts, your opinions and ideas, and understand what is going on there. So that would be my one ask. And what I've been trying to promote is that we continue that community, understand that the MLS is agents and brokers, and you can be involved in lots of different ways to understand and help advance our industry.
That's great. Anything from you, Brad?
Yeah, I would just close by saying, part of the reason why I love this industry is it's a big family, and your competitors, even in the MLS executive space, your competitors, your brokers and agents. And like Denee said, I feel like I want to reach out to 3 to 5 brokers a week. I used to have lunch with 3 to 5 brokers a week just to make sure I have a heartbeat of what's going on in my market, because my job and my organization runs for their benefit. And we're not going to make everybody happy. We know that. No one can. But to understand, keep your finger on that heartbeat and that pulse of what's happening in your market, and to work closely with the brokers and agents to make the MLS better. And to make our industry better. I think that's the key, whether we're in this crazy time, which the other thing just to point out is 2020 has been a really crazy year. And through it all, one of the most amazing achievements we've seen is real estate has been better than ever. It's changed in morph, but it's been better than ever. And that's a testament to all of the agents and brokers out there, and to our economy and the wealth building of real estate. And I'm proud of our industry. We've adapted well, and we're going to keep adapting well going forward.
Well, for
Jack, if I can add one more piece on that, Brad says reaching out, or I said reach out to MLS. If anybody has feedback for CMLS or for me, or challenges they're running into, I love hearing those. So I would highly encourage emails, phone calls, whatever. I love talking to people and hearing their different perspectives, and so I can better understand what's happening as well. So please, I would love to virtual coffee, virtual happy hour, whatever.
Yeah. So those listening. If you thought that organized real estate was sleepy town in 2020, as you can see from this conversation, it is not. There is a lot going on, and I think we could have gone on for another hour talking about some of the changes in policies and debating it, because there's clearly, this is an industry in motion, and MLS is no exception to that. So Brad and Denee, I want to just personally and from T360, thank you for taking the time, sharing your perspectives on the industry, where we are, where we're going regard to MLS. And we wish you the best, and we look forward to hopefully getting to see you in person at in-person conferences once we're all allowed to do that. So again, thank you very much. And Clint, thank you for co-hosting. It's been another great session.
Thank you, T360.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye.